Hey Grace House Churches, hopefully you have enjoyed dinner and now you want to talk about Jonah chapter 2. So last week we learned that Jonah is the prodigal prophet running from God, going the complete opposite direction of where God had asked him to go. Ends up on a boat, there's a storm, gets thrown into the water, swallowed by a big fish. And this is where the story turns. Last week he was running from God, this week he's running back to God, sort of. And so what we learned is that often God uses distress to catalyze life change. In Jonah's distress, he cries out to God and he surrenders and ultimately finds himself saying, okay, God, I'll do your will, even though his heart isn't completely changed. And so Bible scholars debate on whether or not Jonah's prayer was raw and meaningful and real, or if it was just kind of self-centered and he just wanted to get out of the fish. But what we said this week was that God will receive a begrudging heart, but God loves a broken heart. And the design of the gospel isn't that you would just stay in this distress surrender cycle where you would have trouble in your life, you'd cry out to God, then you'd do it your own way, distress, surrender. But rather, the distress would lead you to a place of being moved by what Jesus did for you. So that when you sin, you don't begrudgingly obey in response, but you brokenheartedly obey. You see the judgment or the anger or the lust or the fear in your life, and you start to see it like God sees it. And you start to have a sorrow over your sin, a brokenness over your sin. And you want it out of your life because it's an idol. That's what Jonah says his sin is. It's idolatry. It's craving things more than God, wanting things more than God, desiring things more than God. And that always leads to the pit. And so when we find ourselves in the pit and we're coming out of it, my encouragement to you is be really curious about how you're responding to sin. Are you begrudgingly obeying because you have to, shamefully, frustratedly? Or by the power of the Spirit, are you getting to a place of cheerful obedience, joyful obedience? So I asked the church this week to ask God to give them brokenheartedness, to ask them to feel the weight of their sin, and to apply the gospel to that. So we don't spend our whole lives in the despair, distress, surrender cycle, but rather we move on to the joyful, brokenhearted obedience cycle. And so I look forward to you guys having a conversation. What do you think? Did Jonah mean his prayer? Did he not? How are you responding to sin in your own life? And how can this community help you move from begrudging obedience to brokenhearted obedience?